The glass is blurred by gray mist.
Title, please.
The double jeopardy mistake that almost freed a killer.
High above New Zealand's capital, the Supreme Court is tasked with resolving the country's most complex legal disputes. In April 2026, they handed down a ruling on a violent death that tested the extreme edges of criminal procedure. The physical facts of the December 2022 crime were clear. Following an argument, the driver hit his mother's partner, Taku Paul, with a car. A minute later, he turned the vehicle around and hit Mr. Paul a second time. This logic chart maps out how one tragic event split into a bizarre legal contradiction. The Crown prosecution made an unusual choice. They filed 2 non-alternative charges of murder for hitting a single victim. As a result, the jury returned 2 different verdicts for the exact same death, a conviction for manslaughter on the first strike and a conviction for murder on the second. That dual verdict triggered a massive procedural problem. Section 47 of the Criminal Procedure Act 2011 codifies the principle of double jeopardy. A defendant cannot be convicted twice for the same culpable homicide. The defense took this contradiction straight to the appellate courts. Their argument was strictly mathematical. The moment the jury delivered a manslaughter verdict for the first strike, double jeopardy attached. Therefore, the second verdict, murder, was legally invalid and had to be thrown out. The prosecution had made a clear paperwork error by pursuing 2 separate charges. Without an intervention by the Supreme Court, a convicted murderer was positioned to walk away from a wife sentence due to a technical drafting mistake. To unravel the mess, the Supreme Court had to examine the question trail. This is the step-by-step logical checklist a jury must complete to secure a legal conviction, answering specific questions about the evidence. The very first requirement on that trail is proving Actus Reus, the physical act that directly caused the death. This medical timeline isolates the precise physical events within that 1-minute window. The defense raised a distinct physiological question. Because the impacts were so close together, could the victim have already been deceased from the first strike before the car returned for the second? The Crown called Dr. Stables, a forensic pathologist, who testified that the injuries from the 2 impacts were distinguishable. He noted that the initial injuries from the first strike would have eventually resulted in death. However, the severe chest injury sustained during the second impact drastically hastened that outcome, causing rapid death. Because of this medical evidence, the jury was entitled to be sure beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Paul was still alive, lying on the road when the second strike occurred. This forensic distinction proved the 2 hits were not simultaneous. The second strike was an independent, operative cause of death. Proving the physical act is only half the question trail. The focus then shifts from the mechanical damage of the vehicle to the psychological state of the driver. Securing a murder conviction requires proving mens rea, or the guilty mind. A physical action that causes death is not murder unless the person executing the action possesses explicit murderous intent. The jury determined the first strike was born out of chaotic recklessness. That mental state met the threshold for manslaughter, but not for murder. The critical pivot happened after the first impact. The driver stopped the car and looped the vehicle around to face the helpless victim lying on the asphalt. The jury had to evaluate that specific maneuver. They were asked to identify if specific murderous intent formed in the driver's mind during those seconds he spent turning the car around. Physical causation alone cannot carry a murder charge. The conviction relied entirely on the jury validating the exact moment the driver's intent shifted from reckless panic to a deliberate decision to kill. In April 2026, the Supreme Court acted as the final arbiter of this double jeopardy conflict. The justices acknowledged the Crown's error. Splitting a single homicide into 2 separate non-alternative counts created the very paradox that allowed the defense to appeal. Under Section 74 of the Senior Courts Act, the Supreme Court dismisses appeals unless there is a genuine appearance of a miscarriage of justice. This diagram visualizes the completed question trail checklist the jury answered. Despite the prosecution's charging mistake, the jury correctly evaluated the physical reality of the second strike and explicitly confirmed the driver had murderous intent when he ran the victim over a second time. The Supreme Court dismissed the appeal, allowing the murder conviction to stand. While the justice system frequently produces administrative errors, this ruling proved that a conviction will survive procedural attacks if it is built on the rigorous step-by-step establishment of forensic truth and precise intent.
With a dull sound, a technicality is a wide and hollow space. The engine